can listen to that and sit still, you have a problem. That is the latest creation from the City Champs, the Luna 68 album. The City Champs organ trio actually has provided the intro and outro music to the Clemson Dubcast since it started back in August of 2018. George Sluppick is the drummer for the Memphis-based band, and he is our interview subject for today. Off the beaten sports path, of course, but we're known to do that every now and then here, particularly when it involves music-related stuff. Those of you at TigerIllustrated.com know that on the message board, frequent conversations about various musical styles and such, including most recently a long thread on the song Kid Charlemagne by Steely Dan, and the bass player, various bass interpretations of it, which became various drum interpretations of it. So really cool stuff. Yet another reason to join TigerIllustrated.com with my friend Paul Strelo and, of course, publisher Chris R. Title sponsor of the Dubcast since the very beginning, back in August of 2018, Parham Smith & Archenhold Law Firm in downtown Greenville. They want you to know that their office remains open and available to serve you during the COVID-19 crisis. They are also offering their clients the ability to meet via telephone or through video conferencing. Whether you have a loved one who has suffered from a car accident, defective product, a neglectful nursing home facility, or medical malpractice issue, Parham Smith & Archenhold's Greenville lawyers can provide the protection and guidance you need. Free consultations, 864-990-4581, or on the web at parhamlaw.com. That's Parham law.com. If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Solero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Solero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Solero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Solero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Solero at solerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Okay, to our interview with George Sluppick, professional drummer. Been listening to his music for a long time and then finally befriended him several months ago through his Patreon page, which allows him and other professional musicians to impart their knowledge and to have relationships with a lot of their fans, which is super cool stuff, which we'll get into, along with a lot of other really cool stories from George about his experience with JJ, Grey and Mofro, Chris Robinson Brotherhood, and plenty more. Here we go. Enjoy. Okay, I am honored to be joined by George Sluppick, whose drumming I have been worshiping, I guess, maybe lack of a better term, for about the better part of 2 decades now, and have been privileged to actually get to know him over the last several months. How you doing, man?
Hey, Larry, it's so cool to be here, man. Thank you for having me on, man. What, really? 20 years you've been listening to me?
So the first, the way I stumbled on you was there was some newsletter. It was probably early 2000s. I forgot where I picked it up. I might have picked it up from a record store here in Clemson. I forgot what it was called, but it was the Fog City Records newsletter. And,
oh, wow.
And it was announcing the Blackwater album with Mofro.
Yeah.
And I was like, that looks cool. Just the description of the description of the sound, the swampy, groovy description of it without even having heard it. I'm like, okay, I got to get that album. And I got the album and it was in my rotation for years and years and years and years and years and still is. And then, yeah, it was just, I guess that's where it started. And then seeing you live, including here in Clemson at the little place you remember called The Joint. Once I saw once I saw you in person, I'm like, okay, that's the kind of drummer I want to be. So yeah, the better part of 2 decades.
Wow, man. That's fantastic. I owe, and I always tell him this every time I talk to him, Dan Prothero, who's the owner of Fog City Records. He's been in New Orleans now since I think about maybe 2012 or 2013 or something like that. He sold his house in San Francisco where he had been for a long time. I think he's originally from like Kennebunkport or something. He's from like Maine or somewhere out there. But he had that label Fog City Records, and it's so funny how from my career, excuse me, I just had some chili a minute ago, man, and I had a grilled cheese ham and cheese sandwich with this chili, man. I think I'm a little bit lactose, so I'm clearing my throat a bunch. I think it might be because from the cheese that was in the chili and on the sandwich. It had a little bit of overload. But man, Dan is an interesting guy, man. And when he, I first met him, he signed Robert Walter. And Robert Walter's 20th Congress, and I was playing drums for Robert Walter, and we did a record with Robert on Fog City called Money Shot. He actually had Stanton Moore play drums, and it was weird because I had just gotten in Robert's band, but he had already booked the session to do the record with Stanton Moore, but they brought me in to play percussion on a song, at the very end, just kind of give me a pat on the back. But I was already touring with Robert when they did that record with Stanton, and but then shortly after that, Dan Prothero signed Fog City, or signed Mofro to Fog City, and the story I heard was that they spent a week in the studio with some drummer that they had met in London. There's a big long backstory about Mofro when they were from Florida, but they lived in London for a few years and were working with a label out in London. But then they got tired of being in London. They wanted to come back to the States. They found Fog City Records. Dan Prothero heard their music and was like, I want you guys on my label. So they moved back to the States, got signed to Fog City. But they brought this guy over to play drums that they had been playing with in London. And he was his name is See B. And he's actually on 2 of the songs on Blackwater. He's on Joke House and one other tune. It's been years since I've heard that record, but anyway, he's on 2 of the songs. You can see it in the credits. But it was the only 2 songs. I have a week in the studio. They were the only 2 songs that were usable from the session with See Me, because he was coming from like a drum and bass kind of background, And Mofro, if you're a fan of Mofro, you know that this stuff is kind of down tempo. It's real swampy, real groovy. It's like Tony Joe White meets Otis Redding kind of stuff. And See Me had no relation to that style of music, to any like country swamp or anything like that. So they they wrapped after about a week with Simi, and they were like, I don't know if we got anything usable in that, but we don't have an album. I know that. And so Dan heard me playing with Robert Walter, and he approached me and said, I just signed this band Mofro. We were just a week in the studio with this guy Simi, and it didn't work out, and we're wondering if we could hire you to do this record, because we've already spent a bunch of money, but we got to do this record. So strangely enough, I was on the road with Robert Walter at the time, and we did a show in Gainesville at a place called Sidebar, and JJ Gray and Daryl Hance came out to that gig and were sitting on the side of the stage watching us play the whole gig. And I had a feeling it was them because they didn't look like anybody else in the crowd. You know, they were wearing camouflage hats, and you know, they were definitely like really eyeballing the band and me in particular. And so we went on set break. They came up and introduced themselves, and I was just really humble guys and just like the nicest dudes. Fast forward about I don't know, 2 weeks or something like that, flew down to St. Augustine and cut that record with them, that Blackwater record. And they ended up using 2 of the tracks that Timmy had played on, and they put on their record. Oh, Nair Sugar was the other one. Junk House and Nair Sugar. Those are both Timmy on drums. But man, well, that record came out and it was on NPR's. Terry Gross or somebody did like a little segment or something on Mofro, and the band like took off, and like, you know, I ended up leaving Robert Walter's band. I joined up with Mofro and played with him for a good while. But it was so funny because like meeting Dan Prospero, like things really took off for me, you know, like being associated with that level. With that label. I met so many great people. Papa Malley, I played on a Papa Malley record, and you know, of course, just, you know, all the wonderful people. Charlie Hunter. My relationship with Charlie Hunter was through my association with Robert Walter, because we were signed to the Dan's label. So anyway, I'm kind of talking a lot, but man, I love Dan. Every time I talk to him, I said, man, you know, I'm glad I know you, bro, because I met a lot of people through you.
And I guess given that this is a sports related podcast, sports centric podcast, I'm gonna have to put I'm gonna put some stuff into layman's terms, since it's not like I don't want to get too. I mean, I do want to get into the weeds, but I want to explain when we do. When you say that previous drummer was from more of a drums and bass background, that was just more straight ahead, not really swung, like, not really funky, I guess. Is that a good way to?
So drum and bass is a style, right? So when you think of funk drumming, you know, you think of like, you know, the guys that played with like James Brown, or, you know, the music that came out of Memphis, you know, in the 60s and 70s, you know, Isaac Hayes and Stax, you know, or like Aretha Franklin, you know, or Otis Redding, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like super funky, or Parliament Funkadelic. But in the 90s, I guess it was sometime in the 90s, a style was developed that they called drum and bass, and it's like really super percussive. It's very syncopated, but it's also usually like really fast. You know, it's like. You know, and there was like a million bands that came out that had this really fast drumming, and this guy Simi G that they played with had this drum and bass kind of style. So he was approaching their stuff, you know, from that background, and he wasn't even really that good. Very good at that. But you know, when they tried to get him to, you know, half that down and slow it down and play it like half that tempo, he just couldn't do it, you know. So that's how I got the gig with Mofro, and then I ended up joining the band, you know, not long after we made the record together.
I remember when you guys played. I'm always fascinated, like, not just by the music on the stage, maybe more so fascinated by the life that the bands lead when they're off the stage. And I remember going and peeking outside, I guess maybe after the show, and seeing a Winnebago sitting right beside the joint. And I'm just like, and you mentioned you guys you guys became very. You got a big boost from the NPR mention and segment, and so you guys, I don't want to say made it, but you guys were successful, and but I'm not sure the average person really understands, even for the bands that are successful touring bands, it's still rough in most cases, and I'm guessing in the case of riding around in a Winnebago back in, I guess, like 2005, 2006. What's that like?
Man, it was it was really tough. At first, you're like, oh wow, we're going on, we're going camping, and at the end of the day, we get to play music together, and then we get back in the RV and we go camping again to the next town. We would stay at what are those camping sites that they have all over the country? I forget what they're called. It's a famous company that has campsites.
Y'all would break out tents and stuff?
No, we didn't have tents. No, we would sleep in the RV. I mean, it was a 40-foot, 42-foot RV. I mean, it was pretty big. I remember I remember JJ buying that thing, and he spent a good amount of money on it, and he really cleaned it up. He's a real handy guy. He and Daryl got in there and really dialed it in. So, I mean, it was pretty nice. It had a nice diesel engine, and but man, that RV and traveling around and sleeping in campsites, in an RV, and every once in a while we would get a hotel room so that everybody could take showers, so you're taking a shower every, 2 or 3 days, maybe sometimes longer. And, if we would hope that we always hoped that the venues that we were playing at had a shower. Some venues have showers, like if we were at the Knitting Factory in Los Angeles, for example, when it was there, they have a shower, or if you get to House of Blues or something, they're going to have a shower in the dressing room, so, gigs like that were really, we really looked forward to places like that because the catering would be good. And, we had a bunch of stuff on our contract stating what the things that we would like to have backstage for us catering, whatever was left over at the end of the gig, when we were packing our stuff up, man, everything went onto the RV. So we filled up the refrigerator with booze and with chips and salsas and drinks and hummus and pita and because man, we would just do amazing, crazy drives. I remember we had this booking agent. I'm not going to call him out because he might get upset if he hears this. I remember we had this booking agent, and a tour, if you're out for say 28 days straight or something, you might have to drive from Albuquerque to Nashville, and there might not be a gig in between. And if you look on the map, Albuquerque and Nashville is a long way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then after the Nashville gig, you might have to go and play up in New York. And there might not be a gig in between Nashville and New York. You just got to drive your ass up there. So, and then you got to go, and you would hope that the tour manager, or the booking agent, when they're booking these tours, you would hope that they would string along so that you're not crisscrossing around the United States. At one point we used to call them the Star of David tours, where you're going Albuquerque to Nashville to New York, down to Texas, and back up to Chicago. And there were definitely tours like that. that it just happened that that's how the routing was. Generally they would try to string the dates together, in a more practical way. But there were definitely some that were pretty wild, and one in particular, we had to drive from Texas, like Austin, Texas, to Colorado without a gig in between. And, that's a couple of days to get from Austin, Texas to, say, Boulder, Colorado. And you got to drive through some desert. And on our way to Colorado, it was summertime, and the air conditioner went out in the RV. And there's 5 of us on this RV. And we're all wearing shorts and tank tops, and we're sweating. We've got the windows open. We're driving across the country. Man, we did some crazy stuff.
So
near accidents, and flat tires on the side of the road next to a river, and just so many crazy stories.
So in the Mofro days, did you have a crew, or was it just y'all?
We didn't have a crew
at all.
When I came into the band, when I came into the band, we had it was me and JJ Darrell and Adam Scone. It was just the 4 of us in JJ's RV, and then we hired a guy from Boulder, named Chris DeLucchi, to run sound, and he was a sound guy, and he ran the sound at the board, but he also tour managed, and a tour manager's job basically is to handle most of the logistics while you're on the road. So the advancing of shows, for example, it's called advancing the show. So say, it's Monday, but on Thursday night, we're going to be, Monday we're in Tulsa, but on, Thursday we're going to be in Forest City, Arkansas, or something, or Fayetteville, Arkansas, or something like that. So Chris's job is to call the club in Fayetteville on Monday and say, hey, this is Chris, tour manager with JJ Grey, and, we're playing George's Majestic Theater in Fayetteville on Thursday. He's like, oh yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to seeing you guys. It's like, well, I just want to go over, some of the stage plot and the back line, and, they have all this terminology that they, you have to know, to get this job done. So it's like the tour manager is overwhelmed with stuff that they have to remember every single gig. You know what I mean? So, and he was doing that. Plus, he was running sound for the band. So that's a really big job.
So, is there a clear sort of dividing line between the band that, like Mofro, that is successful but still sort of, roughing it, and you're having to set up and break down your own drums every night, versus another band you've been in, Chris Robinson Brotherhood, that has a nice bus, and I guess a crew. Is there a clear sort of line that is definable? Like, okay, we need to get to this level where we can sort of graduate to this big bus and actually having a crew? Or is it kind of murky?
It depends, man. To be honest, for the 5 years that I played with Chris Robinson, I set up and broke down my drums the entire time. No one ever did it for me.
Okay.
No one ever did it for me. unless it was one of those gigs where backline was provided. So backline is what they call stage equipment. And if backline was provided, saying like, if so like we had like we would have these fly-in dates where the band would get on a plane and fly to, fly out to, Colorado or New York or wherever. And the musical equipment was already there on the stage set up, and there was a crew of people there waiting to help you with anything that you needed. There were definitely times like that, where I would show up, walk up to the stage at a festival or something, and there'd be a drum kit on there. And at that point, I just used my own snare drum and cymbals, so I'd sit up there and, and adjust the drums that they provided for me and, adjust them to fit me. But for the rest of the remainder of the time that I was in his band, we set up and broke down every time. And we started out in a van, and within a couple of months we were on a bus, and then we stayed on a bus for the rest of the time. But there were tours where it was like, hey, we're only going to go out for 10 days on this run, and we're not going to rent a bus. We're going to get a big giant Sprinter van. Is everybody cool with that? And we're like, well, yeah, of course, But the only crew we had when I was with Chris Robinson was a tour manager and a guy that was like our Renaissance man. He handled merch. He handled all of our merchandise, so selling T-shirts and stuff at the merch table at the shows. But he also recorded all of our shows and then edited all of the shows and loaded them onto this website where people could go and buy the show that they had just seen like 2 nights earlier. So that was really cool. His name was also Chris Albers, really, really good dude. So it was like Chris and Brian. That was our crew, and then whoever was driving the bus. So we had 2 crew guys and then the 5 guys in the band. So there's 7 of us. The whole time I was in Chris's band. And we never had a sound man. We always used whoever was at the venues that we were playing at, So the next level up from that would be like Derek, Derek and Susan, Tedeschi Trucks band. Now they have at least 1 bus, sometimes 2 buses. But they have a couple of semis that have, all the stage gear and everything. And they don't have to set up or break down any of their own gear unless they want to. Because at that point, they've got 2 buses. So they've got, they actually might have 3 buses. Derek and Susan are on a bus with their kids. And then the band bus with all the guys in the band, because they got like 10 or 12 people in that band, right?
Yeah.
And then they got the crew bus, so they have all their stagehands and their lighting guy and their monitor guy or girl or whatever, and then their sound man, and then a couple of semis worth of gear, So that's the next level from like where Chris Robinson was at when I was in his band, Chris Robinson Brotherhood. That was the level that we wanted to get to. We did shows with Derek and Susan, and it was always pretty obvious like what was going on, because our bus would pull up, and we didn't have a trailer. All of our gear fit underneath the bus. So where a normal tour bus, has a trailer, we put all of our gear. We did it ourselves, man. I loaded and unloaded my drums and everybody's gear, all the speakers and amps and cable boxes and everything. I loaded them and unloaded them every night underneath the luggage bays of our tour buses.
Wow.
It was a lot of work. So, you get to the venue usually in the afternoon, and you've been driving all night long. Bus driver, the bus driver has the hardest life, actually, because the bus driver sleeps during the day and then drives at night. So when the performance is over, you've packed up all the gear, then you get on the bus. It's, it's anywhere between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., right? So you get on the bus, and then, you're excited because, you've been working all day long or whatever. And then there's party, and on Chris's bus, there was a party every single night. I swear to God, until the party would go until he passed out, which is usually about 6 a.m., somewhere between 5 and 6. And I usually was so exhausted that I would go straight to my bunk and put my headphones on and close the curtain and try to get as much sleep as possible, because it's physically exhausting on your body. In so many ways, but you go to sleep in your bunk, 3 a.m. or whatever, 2 a.m. and then the bus driver checks out of his hotel usually around 6 and gets on the bus and starts to drive. Now the bus is parked at the venue, right? So the bus driver gets on the bus and then drives through the morning. Your best days are when the gigs are like maybe 3 or 4 hours. The cities are like 3 or 4 hours apart. The ones that are really hard is like when you've got like 12 or 14 hours to drive. Those are really tough days. But the bus driver drives to the next gig, next town or whatever, and goes straight to the venue, whatever, the club or the theater or the shed or the Coliseum or wherever it is, or whatever town, and parks backstage. And then you always have a hotel room for your bus driver, which is another thing that the tour manager has to set up, days in advance. So then, the bus driver gets off the bus. You have a car waiting for the bus driver. That's another thing that that's another piece of the logistic. You get a car or a taxi or an Uber or something like that to take the bus driver to their hotel, and then they go to sleep. So it's like, probably 10 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. The bus driver goes to the hotel, he goes to sleep, and they sleep all day long. Meanwhile, guys on the bus, we wake up, we have our morning or afternoon or whatever, go get some food, go try to find some coffee, try to visit whatever city you're in for however many hours that you can before you have to, go load in your gear, which is usually about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 or 3:30, between 3 and 4 is your load in time. And, at that point, then, unload all the gear, you bring it into the venue, you set it all up, and then the sound man puts all the microphones and tests all the gear, where they're like, check 1, check 2, check 1, 1, 2, 3, they do all that for several hours. And then usually around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, then all the band assembles on the stage and you do a sound check. Now with Chris's band, Chris liked to basically play an entire show at sound check.
No way.
Because, I'm just going to tell you, he was stoned out of his mind for the majority of it. So, he's just like, oh, yeah, man, it sounds really good, man. Let's just keep playing. But, we played for 2 hours already, and in 3 hours, they're going to open doors and this place is going to be full of people and we're going to have to play a 3-hour show. So how about we just everybody, you just let all of us go to a hotel and take a nap for the next few hours before oh my gosh, man. I could never say that to him because he's the leader of the band and he's signing my paychecks. So, I just kind of, when you're there, you just have to deal with whatever's going on,
At Harris Home and Harris Commercial, they want you to get every detail right. Harris means beautiful design that delivers taste, style, and comfort. It's a legacy of integrity built by generations of outstanding reliability and service. It's all about creating just the right look, the perfect feel, and dependable function for every room in your home or any business setting. Folks at Harris are Clemson people based in Anderson. A lot of Clemson University's recent facilities improvements have Harris's fingerprints all over them. For endless flooring possibilities and breathtaking renovation, the only name you need to know is Harris. Website is discoverharris.com. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. On your recommendation, I read the fantastic book by Steve Gorman, the Black Crowes' former drummer, called Hard to Handle.
My God.
The life and death of the Black Crowes. One of the best rock band memoirs ever. I'm curious.
I agree.
Go ahead. You agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, how did you get into CRB, and then what was your notion of him going in, and then how, if it did, how did it change during your tenure in the band, which I don't know was how long?
5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Almost, yeah. From March of 2011 until January of 2015. So I guess that's 4 years. 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to the Black Crowes when I was, I think I first heard the Black Crowes when I was 23. I had just moved out west from Memphis, 1991. And I worked at this coffee shop who, the owner of the coffee shop was a Crowes fan, and he had a bunch of CDs. And I remember we had both Shaker Moneymaker and Southern Harmony records on CDs at the cafe. And it was just great music to listen to while you were pouring coffee for people, and I had long hair, and I just moved out to California from Memphis, and I thought they were fantastic. I definitely related to their music. I thought it was, I thought it was great. I thought Chris had a really great voice. I didn't like some of the stories that would come out about him as a person. Some of the things that he did to people, I know there's a classic story about him spitting a loogie into a young cashier's girl's face for not serving or not selling him beer after 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whatever the curfew was. And he's like, Chris Robinson, don't you know who I am? She's like, I know who you are, but I can't sell this to you. That was a big story that came out in the 90s about him. And, it was all over the news. He spit in somebody's face. And later on, he apologized or whatever. But still, it's just like, well, what kind of person does that, So that was like, so I would hear stories about, things like that about him. But we met actually when I was playing with Mofro. We opened for the Black Crowes in Columbus, Ohio, and immediately they were assholes to us. And I was like, oh, okay. So all these things that people say about him are kind of true. He's not a nice guy. And we had our show, and our show was really good. But when you're the opening band in front of the Black Crowes, probably the majority of the crowd is there to see the Black Crowes. And if you're not the Black Crowes, they're not going to like you, most likely.
Yeah.
And, we're playing this super funky, swampy stuff from Florida, and as good as Mofro was, it wasn't the Black Crowes. So, their fans weren't really too crazy about us. But that being said, we ended up opening for them several other times. And at least one of the times was at a festival, and I remember looking over at on the side of the stage while we were performing, and I see Chris and Rich Robinson standing there watching me play. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. The Crowes guys are just standing here watching me play. That's nice. So fast forward to 2010, I'm living back in Memphis, and I've got an organ trio called the City Champs, and we are on the road touring with the North Mississippi All-Stars, which the guitarist for them, Luther Dickinson, had been touring as the guitarist in the Black Crowes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Luther is a big fan of the City Champs. He brought us out on tour with him and his band, and we did a couple of months with those guys. When that tour ended, he was getting ready to go back out on the road with the Black Crowes, and he told me that he was going to give Chris Robinson a copy of the City Champs record, because this was going to be the last Crowes tour, and Chris was starting a new band in L.A., and for some reason was having difficulty finding a drummer to play shuffles. And he, to his credit, Luther gave Chris a copy of the Champs record. And then 2 weeks later, my phone rang, and it was Chris Robinson. He said, hey, man, this is Chris. Didn't you used to play drums for Mofro? And I said, yeah. And he goes, I remember watching you play. And I go, yeah, man, I remember meeting you. We opened for you guys. We opened for them at a couple of festivals, one time in Australia. We did a few shows with them, and he said he remembered me, and he wanted to bring me out to Los Angeles to try out for his new band, the Chris Robinson Brotherhood. Well, my Brotherhood? Is your brother in the band? he's like, fuck my brother. I hate my brother. And I was like, okay, wow, all right. So these rumors are true. Then all these things that people are saying about you and your brother, you guys actually really do hate each other. And he's like, yeah, I can't stand my brother. And I was, wow. Now, hindsight is 20/20, man. I learned a lot in that band. I learned how important it is to never lose sight of, your humanity, and how these bands wouldn't be anything without the fans. And like people traveled all over the country to come and see Chris Robinson's band. We had these fans were just fanatics for this band. They loved Chris, but then we had our own thing. It didn't sound like the Black Crowes. It was its own thing. It was groovy, it was funky, and I would see people would come up to me at the show and say, hey, I live 500 miles away. I came to see you guys because you weren't going to play anywhere near my town, and I love your band. And can I get a photograph? Can I get an autograph or whatever? And 9 times out of 10, Chris would be on the bus, not out there signing autographs with people. And I'd be like, hey, man, this guy's been waiting all night long to get an autograph, and he's been standing outside near the bus for 3 hours after the show. You know, can you just sign his poster? He's been a fan of yours for 30 years. Fuck that guy.
Wow. Wow, man.
Yeah, man. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. He's not a nice person.
I guess I shouldn't say wow having read that book, because after reading the book, the reaction is, yep, that sounds exactly like what Steve Gorman described through almost every page of that book.
Yeah, he's not a nice guy, man. And no one really understands, like, why he isn't a nice guy. You know, I mean, he's had everything handed to him pretty much his whole life, you know? I mean, I don't know. Spoiled rotten, I guess.
So how did the end come with CRB and you?
The end was very strange, man. I won't go into everything, but I'll just tell you this, that I guess there came a period about 3 years in where we did one full year of touring, right, in 2011, and then close to a full year anyway. We started in March of 2011, and then we ended in January. We ended in late December. But then in early January, we hit the studio and recorded those first two records. So really, we were busy from January 2011 until March 2011 until January 2012. In February or March of 2012, the Black Crowes got back together for their very last tour. It was like a reunion tour. We're getting the band back together, kind of thing. And they made a lot of money. Well, when he came back to the CRB after, you know, making all that money with the Crowes and realizing, you know, man, CRB is not making the money that we're making them with the Crowes, we're going to have to ramp things up a little bit. So ramping things up meant that I was going to have to start hitting the drums harder, and we were going to have to start covering Black Crowes songs in the CRB, which was like this, you know, well, you've heard the band.
Yeah, it's like a finesse touch, sort of.
Yeah. Well, when I first joined the band, he told me that he didn't want me to play any rock at all. You know, because I remember in our first rehearsals together, we were playing some song, and I played a drum fill, you know, like, you know, and he stopped the band. He goes, "Hey, man, don't play any rock. I don't want to hear any of that shit. I don't hear any Black Crowes shit in this band. I want you to play that swinging, shuffly, funky Memphis thing that you do." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Then I don't have to be a rock drummer in this band. I can be a Memphis soul drum," which is what he said he wanted, which is what I wanted to do anyway. So for that first year, that's what I was doing. And then when he came back from the Crowes tour, at the end of, I need to back up here. I think we toured actually from 2011 until the end of 2012. That's right. And then in 2013, that's when the Crowes got back together for their last tour. So yeah, 11 and 12, we were on the road. And then 13, he got back together with the Crowes. And then came back at the beginning of 14, having had a year playing with them, and was like, we got to ramp it up. I need you to hit the drums really, really hard. And he started yelling at me on stage. Like, there'd be 1,000 people at a festival, and he's turning around and he's cussing me out on stage because he wants me to hit the drums hard. And he's hard of hearing. So I can hit the drums as hard as I can, and he's having trouble hearing me because his amps are really, really loud. And we're on the stage in front of 1,000 people or whatever, and he's still having trouble hearing me. But to be honest, I mean, you're talking about Steve Gorman. Steve Gorman and I hit the drums completely different from one another. Steve grew up in the Black Crowes and learned how to hit the drums really, really hard because they were playing in front of 50,000 people on a regular basis. You know?
Yeah.
I've only played in front of 50,000 people a couple of times in my life. But when you do it for like 20, 30 years, you know, you learn how to hit the drums a different way, you know? I never played like that. You know, I was always finessing, kind of jazzing the drums. And so we started getting into these arguments. We're really just like one-sided. Chris was just yelling at me backstage after the gigs, and I was just standing there looking at him like, I have no idea why you're so angry right now. So that was the beginning of it. You know, in 2014, things started getting weird with me and him. And he just got real angry, you know, with how I was playing the drums. And when he decides that he doesn't like a person, that's it. They're out. He stopped talking to me. We would play entire shows where, you know, he didn't even turn around and look at me once.
Jeez.
And so for a lot of 2014, it was pretty miserable.
I want to go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Go ahead.
Nope. You go ahead. you were still in mid thought.
Well, I mean, you know, you're asking how it ended. You know, I think he just wasn't happy with how I was playing. You know, even though we had like 2 solid years of really great gigs. I think he was just so fucked up in his own mind, you know, about what was going on with the Black Crowes that, you know, he was trying to get the CRB to sound more like that, but still have it be its own thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That it just wasn't working for me. And, you know, I think that my attitude probably, you know, I probably started to feel, I started to feel like an outsider. You know, because I'd get on the bus and those guys would be partying and having a great time, and I'd just go into my bunk and close the curtains and go to sleep. You know, wake up the next day and do it all over again. And, well, the other thing, too, was, and this was kind of a big deal to him, I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on Chris Robinson's bus, it's a party, and everybody's there. And if you're not partaking, he's upset by that.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, man. I'm telling you. And, you know, I'm being completely candid with you. Yeah, I got sober. And he didn't like that. And that, you know, I think maybe he feels like I'm judging him or something like that. I don't really care what he does. You know, but yeah, that was another part of our relationship ending. Was me not being at the same party, you know.
So while most friends would be like, "Man, good for you," you know, keep it up, stay strong, he's pissed.
Yeah, and it's really kind of funny, you know, because there was a moment when he was married to Kate Hudson where she was like, "Hey, you know, I'm not going to take this from you. You're going to have to straighten up." And he straightened up. He went clean, and he was just like, "Yeah, fuck drugs. You know, I'm sober now." He cut his hair off, you know, and tried to be the sober guy while he was Kate. You know, and of course they broke up, and he was just like, you know, back to doing his regular thing again. But you you would never be able to bring that up with him. Oh, what about the times that you were sober? He would have something terrible to say to you about that.
What a piece of work. Oh my gosh.
He's a piece of work, man. And you know, what's so funny is that, you know, I liked him. You know, he's incredibly charming. You know, a lot of my friends and family met him, and they're like, "God, Chris Robinson's the sweetest guy ever." I'm like, "Yeah, well, see him in the morning when he first wakes up. See if you like him then." Oh, man.
So I want to...
he called me on the phone in January of 2015. We had just done a week-long run in the mountains over New Year's. And had great shows. It was really cold, but we sold out all these shows. We did a couple of festivals. And I knew something was weird because he kind of stopped talking to me back in October and November. But in December, when we did this week together in the mountains, he was all hugs and hey, bro, good to see you, man. I bought him a Christmas present. He's into vinyl, so I bought him this album from this band called Gong, and it was a weird band from the 70s, and he freaked out because I knew it was a record he had been looking for a long time, and I found a copy of it for $80, and I wrapped it up and gave it to him in Denver New Year's Eve, and I was like, hey, man, I left a Christmas present. His birthday's in December, too, so it was Christmas birthday kind of present, and he was really excited to hug me, man. Oh, it's good to see you, man. I love you, man. It's all love. And then the shows were phenomenal. And then I remember January 9th, I got home on the 5th, and he called me 4 days later. He's like, hey, man, it's been a great run, bro, but we're going to move on, man. We're going to let you go. And I was just like, cool, man. Well, that sounds good. Do you mind if I ask why? And he's like, you know why. And I was like, okay, man. Well, good luck to y'all. And he hired my buddy Tony Leone to come and replace me. And they basically just went back to playing the same exact venues that they were playing when I was in the band. So nothing big ever really happened for them,
Yeah.
And then of course, they ended, and then poor Neil committed suicide.
Yeah, Neil Cassell.
Yep.
I want to go back to when you were 19 years old in Memphis. You had graduated from a prestigious creative and performing arts high school, Overton, where you studied music. You studied music theory, sang second tenor in the concert choir, and played drums for their award-winning gospel choir. You were steeped in the local music scene, and then I'm just trying to set the stage here for your introduction to Albert King and how you became the legendary Albert King as a 19-year-old, and how you became his drummer at that ripe young age.
Man, my dad was a bass player and a very active member in the local Memphis music scene. He was a member of the Blues Foundation, and they have in Memphis every year they have the IBC, which stands for the International Blues Challenge. In the 80s, it was called the ABC, which stood for Amateur Blues Competition. But at some point, people were like, we don't like the word amateur, so we're going to change it to international, because there were, blues bands coming from all over the world to perform in this competition. And my dad was this stage and production manager for for back then, for the ABC, for 9 years. And occasionally he would ask me to come and play with a band that didn't have a drummer. And I got to play with all kinds of people. And there was one year during the ABC that there was a group of musicians who didn't have a drummer, and they asked me to play. And for the life of me, I still to this day can't remember who it was. But the bassist that was in that band or on stage that day was Albert King's bassist, and his name is Reuben Fairfax. I was 19. I was working at a local record store here called popular tunes. And got a phone call one day while at work, and I'll never forget this guy, man. He's still alive, actually. I should reach out to him. His name is Reuben Fairfax, but his nickname is Rube. And when he called me on the phone, he said, hello, and he's got a very, very, like, sophisticated sounding speaking voice, and he says, hello, is this George Sluppick? And I was like, yes, it is. And my name is Rube. It's a combination of my first and last name. It's Ruevaix, Rube. And it's from my first name, which is Reuben, and my last name, which is Fairfax. Reuben Fairfax. My friends call me Rube. And I was like, oh, it's nice to meet you, Rube. And he says, I did a gig with you about 6 months ago at the New Lazy Theater, and I was playing bass and you were playing drums, and you're quite good. And I was like, oh, cool, thank you very much. He goes, I got your phone number from Mr. So-and-so, and I can't remember who gave him my phone number. He's like, I am currently playing the bass with Mr. Albert King. Do you know Albert? And I was like, well, of course, man. You know, Crosscut Saw, Born Under a Bad Sign. Yes, man, of course, man. I've been listening to Albert my whole life. He's like, well, Albert is looking for a drummer, and I told him about you, and I was wondering what you're doing. I wonder what you're doing this Tuesday afternoon about 2 p.m. Would you come down to the Peabody Alley and audition for the band? And I was like, wow, of course. So I hung up the phone, and I remember my boss, Mr. Beretta was walking by me, and I was like, Mr. Beretta. He's like, what's going on? I was like, Albert King's bass player just called me. I'm gonna go audition for his band on Tuesday. And I remember he put his arms around me and he goes, it's been nice knowing you, kid. Greatest boss ever met. Such a cool dude. And I remember I went down to this club. It's no longer there. It was adjacent to the Peabody Hotel, which is this old historic 100-year-old hotel in Memphis. And it was a club there called the Peabody Alley, where Albert played 4 nights a week, Thursday through Sunday, I think. And brought my drums down there like 2 p.m, set them up. The band showed up. I didn't know. I was 19, but I didn't know any of these guys, because I'd never seen any of these guys on Beale Street ever. And I'd grown up playing drums on Beale Street, so I didn't know any of these guys. I didn't know who they were, but they were all legends. Rube had been in Al Green's band.
Wow.
Yes, and the keyboard player, Archie Mitchell, was Willie Mitchell's stepson, Archie Turner Mitchell. And then he and I, years and years later, ended up playing in a band called the Bokeys here in Memphis, and we always tease each other about the years that we were in Albert King's band together. Yeah, he was the keyboard player. And then there were 2 saxophone players I'll never forget, and I still don't remember who those guys were because they were phenomenal. But yeah, I played with Albert for about 3.5 weeks. And the day I auditioned for him was very vivid in my memory. We set all the gear up. Albert wasn't there. Guys were like, hey, you know Watermelon Man? I was like, sure. So we started playing Watermelon Man. And we got like midway through the second chorus, and Albert comes walking into the club. Like, from the front door of the club, not from the backstage, from the front of the club. And like a scene out of a movie, man. And like, he comes walking in, and he was big. He was like 6'4", 6'5", 280 pounds or something. And he sat down at a table in front of the band. And then he had his guitar tech brought his guitar over to him, and then plugged it into the amp that was on stage, and then ran out this 50-foot guitar cable out to the front of the audience where Albert was sitting at this table, hands him his Gibson Flying V that he played, and he plugged it in and started jamming with us. And then we ran through a couple of his tunes, and then he handed his guitar back to his tech, and he called me drummer. He knew my name was George, but he never referred to me as George. He just called me drummer. And as I was to find out later that I was the fifth drummer he had gone through in 2 months. So I didn't even know that my days were numbered right away. But he goes, drummer. And I said, yes, sir. He said, do you want the gig? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, it's yours if you want it. He said it just like that. I'll never forget it. Not like, it's yours. You know, he's like, it's yours if you want it. Like, question mark. And I was like, yes, sir, I want the gig. You know, and then that was it. And then we played Thursday through Sunday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 4 nights at the Peabody Alley. We do like the happy hour set. And then on the weekends, we would fly. He had a little charter. He chartered this little Learjet, and we would fly to these cities to do gigs, like one-offs, you know, where we would fly out, do the gig, get back on the plane, and fly back to Memphis. And once we flew up to Cincinnati and played at Taft Auditorium in Cincinnati, opening for B.B. King.
Wow.
And the sad thing was we didn't stay for BB's set. Like, we did our set, and then we went back and we were like loading the gear. And I look over, and BB comes outside, and he's talking to Albert. And the two of them were standing there talking to each other. Now, I had met BB a year before I got the gig with Albert. BB came through town for the Blues Award show, and then came to a jam session afterward at the New Daisy Theater. And he brought his drummer with him, who was so drunk he was passing out at the drum kit on stage. And I had the sound guy go up and tap him on the shoulder between songs and point to me in the crowd, like standing on the side of the stage. And had the guy, I remember the guy's name was Caleb, and I was like, go tell that drummer that I can play drums if he needs to take a nap. I can play drums. And it was like 12:30 at night, and at this jam session, and there was a bunch of people in there. And sure enough, man, the drummer looked over at me and he nodded and like held up the stick, like, come on. And I jumped up on stage. He handed me the sticks. I sat down and played, and we got 16 bars into the tune. And all of a sudden, BB was sitting in his chair in front of me. He turned around and looked at me, saw me sitting back there because he heard the beat change, And I guess he liked it because he got a big smile on his face. And we played through 3 or 4 tunes, and then that was it. And then he called me over afterward and shook my hand and asked me for my phone number.
Wow.
So fast forward a year, and I'm in Albert King's band. And I think BB's drummer must have got his shit together after that, because I never got the call. And that guy Caleb played with BB right up until the end. So I had heard that guy had a serious drug and alcohol addiction for years, playing with BB. But BB kept him in the band because, those guys were really loyal to each other back then. But anyway, a year later, I was playing with Albert, and we opened for BB. And then after the gig, they were outside talking, and Albert, I guess, was telling him about his new drummer, and he called me over to meet BB, not knowing that I already had met BB and played with him. He's just like, George, come over here, or drummer, come over here. Yeah. And I walk over and I was like, yes, sir. And he's like, oh, I'd like you to meet Mr. BB King. And BB took one look at me, and we were shaking hands, and he goes, I remember you. I still have your phone number.
That's great.
And then I think I did a handful of more dates with him. We opened for the nicest thing he ever said to me. We opened for Carl Perkins and Waylon Jennings one time at a festival in Fort Myers, Florida. And after that gig, we got back in the van, and we're driving back to the airport because he wanted to fly back home. I found out later on that the reason he never wanted to stick around after these shows was because he had a real bad gambling job. And he wanted to get down to the casinos in Tunica, Mississippi, and spend all of his gig money that he had just made. You know, he's walking down to the casino with $10,000 or $20,000 or something. He's going to go play blackjack until 6 in the morning and lose it all. Apparently, he was like that. He was just terrible at cards, but he was addicted. You know, and you know how those guys are when they're addicted, they just keep going. Doesn't matter how much money they lose, but yeah. So anyway, we finished the gig in Florida, and we got back in the van, and we were driving. I remember I was in the very back of the bus. Meanwhile, mind you, I'm 19. I'm the only white guy. All these guys are like older black guys, veterans, that had been in Al Green's band and Bobby Blue Bland's band and Willie Mitchell and stuff. And they were like hardened, seasoned road dogs. And I was just like this new young kid with a punk rock haircut, right? Albert's sitting up in the passenger seat, and he looks over his shoulder and he leans over his shoulder and he goes, "Drama!" And I remember he was real quiet on the bus, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Good job, son." And strangely enough, that is that gig that night is the object. I'll text it over to you. That gig is the only photographic proof of my tenure, my 3.5 week tenure in Albert King's band. And did this. You'll get a kick out of this. We got back from that gig in Florida, and the hubby, Archie Turner Mitchell, asked me. He said, "Do you have your passport?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Ron Wood from the Rolling Stones called Albert on the phone last night and invited the entire band to Paris to back him up for 2 weeks at a gallery where he's showing his artwork." I was like, wait, Ron Wood, guitarist of the Rolling Stones, is bringing Albert King's whole band to Paris? He goes, yes, for 2 weeks. And he's got a gallery that's going to show like a whole gallery full of watercolors that he painted, and for 2 weeks, and we're going to back him up and be Ron Wood's backing band in Paris for 2 weeks. Albert King and Ron Wood.
Wow.
So a year earlier, I had been in Nice, France, with my gospel choir from Overton High School that you mentioned. We were there for 2 weeks performing for the French Mardi Gras. So I had a passport. I was ready to go. And when they told me we were going to Paris for 2 weeks, can you imagine? I was 19 years old. I would have just gone crazy.
No doubt.
So I found out that news, and then a couple of days later, my mother called me on the phone and said she wanted to come down to Peabody Alley before the gig and say hello to Albert because she loved his music and she wanted to meet him and thank him for employing me in his band. And so I asked him, Mr. King, my mom would really like to meet you, and she's going to come to the club tonight before the gig. Say hello. Would you like to meet my mom? Oh, I'd love to meet your mother. And all of a sudden, his whole demeanor changed. He's like, "Oh, I'd love to meet your mother. That sounds good. Give me it," because he lived at the hotel. He lived at the Peabody. He's like, "Call me when your mom gets here, and I'll come downstairs. I'll meet your mom." And I was like, "Wow, okay, great." So of course, my mom. His gig was at 7. My mom showed up at 6, And you know what's so funny is like this was 1987, and as I'm talking to you about this, I'm trying to remember how my mom got a hold of me to tell me that she was in the hotel, because I mean this is way before cell phones. I can't even remember a time before cell phones hardly. But anyway, my mom got a hold of me somehow and told me that she was in the hotel lobby. And somebody got a message to me or something, hey, your mom is here. So I go to the lobby of the hotel, and there's my mom. She's got her husband, her second husband, Andy, at the time, and then their two kids. And I was like, oh, hey, Mom. I called up to Albert's room and I said, my mom's down in the lobby with her family, and she wants to meet you. So he came right downstairs, Larry, and shook my mom's hand. She was crying. She was like, it's so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for giving my son this wonderful opportunity to play in your band. You know, he loves your music. We love you. Love you so much. And then he looks at me and then looks at my mom and says, oh, George is doing such a fine job. And that story would be funnier if I had preempted it with all of the curse words that Albert yelled at me on stage for the 3.5 weeks before that moment he met my mom, because it was every derogatory word you could think to call somebody, he would call me on stage, and he hated me.
Really?
Hated me. Oh my God. Yes. He hated me. Like I said, I was the fifth drummer he had had in 2 months, so I think he just, I think it was a prerequisite to the gig. It's like, are you good at getting yelled at? Well, cool, you got the gig. I guess I was good at getting yelled at because he called me an MF for every single night for 3.5 weeks. Horrible, horrible, horrible man. A couple of my friends had been in his band before too, and after me, and we all shared stories about our time with Albert King and how great and awful it was.
What's he yelling at you about?
So, have you ever listened to the original version of Born Under a Bad Sign?
I think so.
It's Al Jackson Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Basically the MGs
mm-hmm.
playing, right? And Al Jackson's playing drums. Check out how Al Jackson is playing that beat. It's basically a 16, or it's an 8th note rock beat. His right hand is playing 8th notes on the hi-hat. Right? Well, fast forward to, that was late 1960s or early 1970s. So fast forward to 1987, 20 years later, Albert wants 16th notes on the hi-hat. And that beat went from boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, to boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom. He wanted really fast 16th notes on the hi-hat. Or boom, boom, bop.
Yep.
And I couldn't play 16th notes with one hand at that tempo when I was 19 for very long before I would tucker out. I'd get tired quickly. And then I'd start playing 8 notes. And the minute it went from 16th notes to 8 notes on the hi-hat, he would hear it. He would turn around and go, 16th, motherfucker!
Oh, my God. Oh, my. Are you
I forgot to ask you if I could cuss on this show. I'm sure
okay.
I've already dropped a couple of F-bombs.
Are you peeing down your leg at that point? Like how?
No, but my dad used to yell at me. I come from a military family. My dad was a sergeant helicopter sergeant in Vietnam, and he used to yell at us. And he was pretty physical too. So I was kind of used to it. My dad used to yell at me on stage and stuff. So. Albert used to come, MF every night, man. And so here we are we're in the lobby of the hotel, and I've been playing with him for almost a month, and I'm thinking he hates my guts and everything, but he's still taking me. He's still keeping me in his band. He's taking me to Paris. I'm really excited. He's shaking my mom's hand, and he tells her, "Oh, George has been doing such a fine job." Well, that was shocking, because not only is he telling her that I was doing a fine job, but he actually used my first name, which I hadn't heard him say before. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe he's not such a bad guy after all, right? So anyway, he tells my mom, kisses her on the hand. He says, we got to go and play this show. Mrs. Rosa, it's really nice to meet you. And they say goodbye, and they walk away. Albert turns and puts his arm around me, and we start walking back to the gig in Peabody Alley. Now, if you can imagine, I'm 5'11" now. When I was 19, I might not have been 5'11". I might have been like 5'8", 5'9". I think I grew a little bit. He put his arm around me. He's 6'5", smoking a pipe. He's like a giant, and he's got this big giant paw around me, and like a bear. And we're walking back to the gig, and he's real quiet. And I remember he's wearing. He's always he wore these suits, without the suit jacket. So he's got suit pants on, a white long sleeve shirt, and then a brown vest, and this big gold chain that had a G on it. The G stood for Godfather. And he had sunglasses on, diamond crusted sunglasses, and a big giant fedora, smoking a pipe. Right? And he's very, very dark skin, and very deep voice, and very angry looking, like he would just kick your ass for looking at him the wrong way. And he just had this presence, right? Very strong presence. And we're walking, he's got his arm around me, and I'm scared to death, but I'm trying to be cool. And he goes, "So you're not going to Europe with us, don't you?"
Oh my God. Wow.
And I said, "No, Mr. King, I didn't know that." He goes, "Well, you're not. And as a matter of fact, tonight is your last night, so play good, son." Oh my God. And the only redeeming thing from that was when we walked back into the club, he went back up to his hotel room to go get his guitar and stuff. I had to go on stage and get ready to play because, it was like right before the gig, literally like minutes before the gig. He drops his bomb on me after meeting my mom and all that whole story. So I walked back into the club, and the sound guy, Mark, had kind of become a buddy of mine. And when I came back in with my head down like that, Mark had already seen Albert fire 4 dudes or whatever before me, so he knew that look. He goes, "Hey, man, what's the matter with you? Did he just fire you? That son of a bitch." He goes, "Well, check this out, George." And he's the sound guy. He goes, you know how Albert doesn't like to hear bass drum in his monitor? Well, look at this." And I was standing right next to him, right behind the soundboard. He turned up the bass as loud as it would go in Albert's monitor. So for the whole entire gig, Albert was just yelling and freaking out. He didn't know what was going on because the bass drum was just like super loud in his monitors. And the monitors are facing up at him, on stage in front of him, and he had like at least 2 of them in front of him. So Mark really cranked it up. So he was really angry. But the whole time I was playing, there was a guy sitting in the crowd off to the side of the stage, staring at me. White dude. I remember he was kind of dark skinned. He looked like he might have been like Indian or something. He had long, straight black hair. And he was just staring at me like kind of angrily. And Rube stood to my left, like right on my hi-hat side. And he was laughing for the entire gig. And at one point, he goes, "Hey, motherfucker." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You see that motherfucker sitting over there staring at you?" I go, "Yeah, he's been staring at me all night." He goes, "You see that motherfucker is?" And I was like, "No, who is it?" He goes, That's your motherfucking replacement. Albert fired me and then made me play another gig, right? One last gig, and then had the guy that was going to replace me in the crowd watching me play. Oh, man. You can't make this stuff up. I promise.
Oh, you poor kid.
I think it makes you a stronger person to go through things like that when you're younger. You know, because it just sort of prepares you for all the assholes that you're going to meet in the entertainment industry later on. So it's not as big of a surprise, you know. So years later, when I meet somebody like Chris Robinson yelling, calling me a motherfucker on stage, you know, I just look at him and go, "Hey, man, Albert King called me that 20 years ago, buddy." So he's a way better guitar player than you are.
So you mentioned earlier the City Champs, which happens to be the bumper music. Since the beginning of this podcast in August of 2018, the title track from the Safecracker has been the intro and the outro music. And I have had a large number of people, "Hey, man," my favorite is when they say, "Is that your band?" And I just have to laugh. I wish. But quite a few people are impressed with the bumper music. And so that's a good segue into the new album that just came out this month, y'all's third album. It's an organ trio out of Memphis, by the way, Luna 68, which I just listened to it for probably the third time earlier today. Great stuff.
Wow.
And
thank you, man.
Yeah, it's just such an accessible sound. I think anybody can listen to it, and I'm including my wife and people I've been around. It seems like just a style of music that is really appeals to everybody.
Man, thank you for saying all that stuff, Larry. It definitely has had such a wide appeal. We're not really doing anything new. I mean, the instrumental. So it's an instrumental band. You know, we don't have any vocals, but that tradition, goes back to, goes back to the very beginnings of music. You know, there's a lot of really, really early music that was just instrumental. That didn't have any vocals at all. But our band is kind of following in the footsteps of the Memphis instrumental bands. The Bill Black Combo, for example. Bill Black Combo were the guys that backed up Elvis, and they were an instrumental group before they backed up Elvis. Of course, Focusy and the G's. Everybody knows about. Green Onions. And the Marquis was another amazing instrumental group from Memphis. So when I came back to, I've left here twice, actually. I left my first time was in 91. I left, moved out to California, and then I came back in 06. And then I left again in 2011 to play with CRB. I came back after that, and I put the Champs together in 2006, and then left in 2011 to go play with CRB, and then I came back to Memphis in 2016, and immediately started playing with those guys again, and it was about that time that we started messed around with ideas for a third record, but we didn't have, we didn't know how that was going to take form, So yeah, we weren't really sure how long it would take or what form it was going to take, but we were really happy with how it turned out.
So the last year, of course, has been very jolting for musicians everywhere, and not just musicians, but the people who, are all dependent on the industry. What
Yeah,
has it?
man.
How has it affected you? I know you're a studio musician as well, and you get a good number of opportunities in that realm. What's the pandemic life, I guess, for lack of a better word, been like for you?
Well, it's affected me pretty heavily. I was, like you said, touring, making my living as a touring musician. I've been working with this singer from New York for the past few years named Morgan James, who's a phenomenal vocalist. We tour all over the United States and all over Europe, and I made a record with her in 2019. And in 2020, we were just at the very beginning of our world domination tour. And when the pandemic hit, all of our gigs were canceled. You know, we had a entire Asian tour that was canceled, believe it or not,
Wow.
in March. In March, we were doing this crazy 3-week tour, which included Japan, China, Hawaii, and then Northern California. And, it all came to a screeching halt. And I had to figure out how I was going to keep making a living as a musician. And I couldn't do it. I had to get a day job. And I got a couple of grants from Music Cares to help me out. There's a company here called Music Export Memphis that was offering grants to musicians and artists who had their income taken. I got 2 of those. I started my Patreon page last year, which has been really wonderful, and I've got tons of videos and stories and lessons, and I do these group hangs with the subscribers once a month, you know, where we just go on the Zoom call with each other and meet and ask questions. And, you know, like you've been on a few of those as one of my patrons, which I love. And I put together this little home recording studio. Started working on that. And in between all that and teaching on the weekends, Patreon, and then working this day job, you know, I've been able to, you know, keep the roof over my head, keep the lights on, as they say. But, you know, what's funny, Larry, is I quit my job yesterday. And it was a lot of things leading up to it, but I've been really miserable at this job. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be at this job anymore. I want to actually be, you know, I don't want to be working in this factory. I actually want to be doing what I've been doing my whole life and just sitting behind a drum set in whatever capacity that means, you know. And when you called and you were like, hey, man, I want to have you on my podcast, I had already quit my job. When I got that email from you, I had just quit my job and I just put it out there into the universe. You know, again, this is going to sound really hippie, but you know, when you want something in your life, if you verbalize it, you know, you can manifest what you want in your own life, you know. And I was like, I want to be playing drums, you know, and whether it's getting more subscribers to my Patreon page where, you know, I'm doing lessons and doing videos and things like that, or getting more session work. I have been getting a good amount of people sending me their songs. That's another thing that I had to figure out how to do, is how to record myself from my own home, which required getting some gear. But it's not like you think. The way that it is these days, like, you don't have to spend, you know, $100,000 to put a home studio together. You can spend $1,000 and have everything you need: a computer, a nice little digital audio workstation, and some software, and that's all you need, you know. And if you're a good enough musician where you can play your instrument really well, then people can email you songs, and whatever instrument they need, that you play, you can put it on there. So if people send me their songs that need drums, I play drums pretty well. I got some decent microphones. My little drum room is set up nice.
Barksdale joining the podcast.
That's actually, I'm out walking him right now, and that's the neighbor's dog barking at him. Yeah, he might bark here in a second, but it's funny. I named him Barksdale because there's a street here named Barksdale, and I think it was named after maybe one of the early founding fathers of Memphis or something. I don't know, because there's a street here, there's a restaurant named Barksdale. The name Barksdale is popular around here, but when I first moved back in 2016, my girlfriend at the time saw the street name Barksdale. She started laughing. I said, "What's so funny?" She said, "Barksdale, that's a great name for a dog. We should get a dog and name him Barksdale." I was like, "All right, we have to do that now."
That's great.
I'm sorry I'm talking so much, man. I'm so excited to be on your podcast. Blabbermouth.
That's the point of the podcast, is you talking and me listening. The Patreon thing, I guess if somebody wanted to join or contribute, is this George Sluppick Patreon? Is that pretty as easy as that to find it?
It's patreon.com/George Sluppick.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. It hit me. I think I had known you had started the Patreon page. Maybe several months had gone by, and then I'm thinking, wait a minute. Like the novelty of being able to, whoever it is, what if you love music and you are really interested in certain musicians or inspired by them, during normal times, you would not be able to have an audience with them on a regular basis, and to take a lesson from them on a regular basis when they're a touring musician would cost a lot of money. And so it just hit me. I just had a revelation. I'm like, I am joining this freaking Patreon page because it's not only do I get something out of it, but so does he. And I don't know, it's a special kind of thing just in general. And I encourage anybody who, whatever type of music they like, whatever musicians they are passionate about, to look them up too, to try to have a relationship with the people you probably would not be able to have one with during normal times. I guess it's one of the silver linings of the pandemic, if that makes any sense.
Man, you said it, man. It's absolutely wonderful. When you see guys like Michael McDonald, Michael McDonald is on Instagram, and I follow him, and he'll come on and he'll say, "Hey, everybody, it's Michael, and I'm going to be doing a live streaming show from my house here in California, and I'd like everybody to tune in, and my Venmo is whatever." Or you can buy tickets online at this site to watch the show. I mean, it's funny because we're all in this, we were all in this thing together. I mean, I connected, absolutely right, man. I mean, I connected with a ton of people just in the last year that I probably wouldn't have connected with otherwise, and become friends with a lot of them, because nothing brings everybody, together like a good old quarantine. But yeah, no, it's been wonderful for me to have people like you and pretty much everyone that's on my page that has subscribed to my Patreon page has expressed some of the same beautiful feelings that you have about it. That they love my music, they love the things that I do, and subscribing to my page gives them a good feeling knowing that they're helping support me to continue to do what I do. And that coupled with, all the donations that I got from people, I put a GoFundMe page up on Monday night because I'm trying to raise some money. You want to talk about broke? Trying to raise just a little bit of money to fix this dang computer of mine that's broken down a couple times, so that I can keep working in my studio, right? Mm-hmm. And one of my patrons suggested, "Oh, why don't you put a GoFundMe page up?" And I hate asking people for money. I just hate it. And but he's like, "Oh man, give it a shot, man. You might get something out of it." So I was like, "Okay, well, I'm not going to ask for very much. The repair is going to be like $400." 8:00 Monday night, this past Monday, I went on GoFundMe. It took me 10 minutes. I took a picture of my laptop, not even a good picture, just like a picture of my laptop, and I titled it George's Laptop Repair Fund. And my goal was $400. Tiny little goal. By 8:30, I had surpassed my goal by over $100. So it was like $550 in there. By 7:00, there was $800 in there, and by the next morning, Tuesday morning, there was almost $1,000. And I was like, well, I've got enough here to, buy like a Mac Mini and like almost a whole new setup for my studio, so I don't even have to worry about my laptop crashing again. I could just get like a whole new thing. So that's when, yesterday I woke up and I saw that, and I was like, man, look, people really care about what I do, and I need to keep doing it. And it was just the fire that I needed lit to help me go through with that decision to leave this day job, because I think you and I have talked before about how hard it's been for me to work at this place, and just the hours too. The hours were really bad, and it wasn't giving me enough time during the week to even play the drums much more than 10 or 15 minutes. What's your
ideal hours a day to play and practice?
Oh man, I actually prefer playing during the day. I'm not very good at night. unless I'm in a band and I'm on the road or whatever. And if that's the case, then between 8 and 10, I'm pretty good. Between 7 and 9 even p.m. But during the day, I'd say between noon and like 4. That's when it's like the sweet spot.
So you play in the whole 4 hours ideally, or just? No.
It's just like, that's the time slot. That you said, what are the hours that are good for you to play? Those are the hours, between those hours.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm at home, it's usually never more than an hour or so. Mm-hmm. I probably spend more time than that, practicing, on my practice pad, but like sitting at the drum set, not more than an hour, unless I'm in the recording studio. And then if I'm in the studio working with Bruce Watson or something, then I'm going to be there at 10:00, and by 10:15, 10:30. We're going to have drum sounds, and I'm going to be tracking. We'll probably have a couple tunes done by 11:00 already. So, speaking of Bruce, we've actually got that City Champs record came out, but the guy that produced that, Bruce Watson, had a bunch of records come out on his label, on his 2 side labels, actually. So he's the owner of Fat Possum Records. in Oxford, Mississippi. But in Memphis, he owns 2 subsidiaries. One's called Big Legal Mess, which the City Champs record is on. But then he's got a gospel label called Bible and Tire. And their motto is retread your soul.
That's cool.
And it's really cool. And I think Ken Tucker did a little piece on Fresh Air yesterday on NPR. Came out about this artist named Elizabeth King. There's a brand new record coming out this week. Actually, I think Thursday, her record's coming out. Amazing, beautiful gospel singer. She's 77 years old, and she's had an incredible life, man. And the music is very old school, like Staple Singers style. So it's like the appeal is, you don't even really have to be into gospel music. When you hear this, you'll be boogieing immediately. It's really good stuff.
Well, George, I have taken way more time from you than I asked for.
No, man, no way. I was on this guy's podcast for like 2.5 hours one time, and we realized at the end, we're like, hey, we've been talking for way too long. If anybody is still tuned into this, then they are hardcore.
That's right. Well,
true believers, as we call them.
That's exactly right.
The people that stay for the whole show to the very end, we call them the true believers.
The people hanging out outside the bus asking for autographs.
Oh man, I'd definitely call those people true believers, because like when you went to a Chris Robinson Brotherhood show, the show was 3 hours long, right? So we played 2 sets with usually about a 20 or 30 minute intermission, and some of those tunes were like 14 minutes long, and the tempo was like 84 BPM, like slow.
Yeah.
And you're at a concert and you're drinking with your buddies. Maybe you're doing some drugs. Who knows? There was all kinds of drugs and alcohol going on at those shows. But like, if you want to come and like dance and have a really good time, and you get to the theater or whatever, and like the band starts out with these really slow jams and keeps that going for 3 hours. If you hang out for that till the very end, you are a true believer. So I would say to all those out there who's ever listening to this very end, Jerry, you are a true believer, because Larry, I have got the gift of gab for sure.
Perfect for a podcast. George, it's been a pleasure, and thoroughly appreciate what your art and our relationship that we've had the last few months. And
man, absolutely, man, you're one of my favorite people in the world now, and I really am very, very grateful to know you, and really appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks to George Sluppick there. Great conversation, some awesome stories and perspective from life on the road, as only a lifetime professional musician can share. Thanks to our sponsors for making this podcast possible, their loyal support. Most of all, thanks to all of you for hitting play on this once every week. Really appreciate that. We're going to close with another song. The one that is currently playing is off of the City Champs' new album, Luna 68. This song is called Skinny Mike. And we're going to transition and play another full song in its entirety from that album called Thinking of You. All right, everybody enjoy. Have a great rest of the week. Be safe. Cheers.